My name is Stacy Lee Song, and I'm the founder and leader of Maine Common Good Coalition. And this is the first of our pre-primary candidate highlight town hall series. I'm so pleased tonight to bring you Congressional District 2 candidate Jared Golden. Your questions will make our town hall, so please be prepared to ask. Jared Golden is the kind of candidate that is easy to support. He grew up in a small rural community in Maine. His first-hand understanding of the people, the history, and the unique challenges in our predominantly rural area brings an attuned awareness to Jared's campaign. Growing up in a small farming community gives a unique understanding of the time-honored traditions of hard-working Mainers. He has had the kind of background which enables him to personally understand the poor and working-class Mainers that make up the majority of our district. The combination of personal experience, compassion, competency, and capability, I believe, is what brought Jared to the Maine House of Representatives in 2014, where he won both elections he ran by a large majority, and then was voted unanimously by the House Democratic Caucus to serve as an assistant majority leader in 2016. Jared, as a candidate is a kind of intelligent, humble, wholesome, grounded, and caring individual that we can trust and need to represent us. When in the state legislature, he has passed bills to increase accessibility for Maine's veterans to the Department of Veteran Affairs by increasing the number of caseworkers who are reaching out to veterans in need, increase resources for veterans to reduce homelessness among Maine's vets, passed a bill to gather data on veterans in need of mental health care and to create a pilot project to provide direct case management for vets in need of mental health treatment. He's passed a bill to define post-traumatic stress as a workplace injury for first responders, passed a bill to increase penalties for wage theft from unscrupulous employers, passed a bill to establish protocols for schools to help reduce youth suicide, repeatedly helped defeat anti-union bills such as the so-called right-to-work legislation. And on the matter that personally drives me to be here, as a farmer, mother, and deeply concerned constituent for our children and their future, Jared meets the urgency of action required in these critical times of climate change. He is strong on issues around climate and Maine's historical and necessary connection with our unique natural environment. He understands that to ensure a viable future for Mainers, we must ensure that Maine's clean air, water, forests, wildlife, and abundant natural resources are protected and prosper. And that with new green energy jobs, we can create the vital and thriving future for our children and our children's children I believe we all want here at home in Maine. And without further ado, let's give a big welcome to Jared Golden.
Thank you. That was great. I'm excited to be back here. This is my second time now standing right here in this space, and both times it's been Stacy that has helped pull this community together. And I was really pleased to have the opportunity to come up here as a candidate and just share this space with you all. Nothing against the other candidates. I like them all. I like doing candidate forums and sharing the stage with them, but I also think there's something really important and more intimate. To be able to just share this space with you and have a real conversation for an hour, as long as we want. And I know that you're having other candidates come, and this is a great thing. We need more of this, not less, which everyone knows with Bruce Poliquin. He's famous for refusing to do town halls, for not being accessible in terms of his offices, his constituent offices, doors locked, lights off, doesn't want to talk to you unless you agree with him on everything. So the more that we can have Democratic candidates out there, no matter what they're running for, having public events, standing in a room with people, and having a conversation, the better and more important I think it is for our party and our state. So, Stacey, that was a great introduction. I think she's done some real research on my time in the legislature and my voting record, the things that I've accomplished. That was impressive. Reading through that list, I don't think I've ever heard anyone nail all of those issues that I've really worked on and prioritized on. One of the first things I think I will say to you that I believe sets me apart from the rest of the primary contenders that I am running against, all of us wanting to go on to take on Bruce Poliquin, is I have a voting record that you can go look and learn about, and I think it's going to give you great confidence in who I am and what I've been as a state legislator representing my community, Lewiston, and what I will do for you. You've heard the list of things that I prioritize. Before I forget, I want to tell you, in the last year, I have been, just last week, awarded the National Alliance for Mental Illness Legislator of the Year Award. Mental illness, helping people have access to health care has been one of the top priorities that I have fought for consistently and been successful passing laws. And it was such a great honor to get that award. This past fall, I got the AFL-CIO Legislator of the Year Award for standing by labor, standing by working people. Always, it didn't matter what the issue was, whether it was higher wages, opposing right to work, union busting legislation that the governor brings forward almost every year. I've always been there for our unions. I could go on in terms of endorsements from all of these types of organizations, but that's not why you're here, and that's not how you're going to make your decision. So, my name is Jared Golden. For those of you that haven't met me, I recognize some of you. I think I probably met you before, either at the last event we had here or at various town halls around the district. I grew up in Leeds, Maine. Stacy talked about that. It's rural Maine, small town, about 1,700 folks. It was a dairy farm town that I grew up in. It's less so now. There's only one surviving dairy farmer. And all the other farms that supported that one all went out of business when the cows were sold for the other farms as well. I graduated high school in 2001, and I went to the University of Maine Farmington. I wanted to be a high school history teacher. That was always my plan all through high school. First couple of weeks there, 9/11 took place. I can remember the day, the place I was at. I was in class. Had a big impact on me. I finished out my year, my freshman year at the University of Maine Farmington, and left, joined the Marines. I was in the infantry. I went to Afghanistan in 2004, Iraq in 5-6. I came home in late 2006. I put down roots in Lewiston, Auburn. That's right near Leeds. My mother, my father, my brother live in Leeds still to this day. My sister lives in Auburn, works there. And Lewiston's been my home for a number of years now. I went to Bates College, where I got my college education. I studied politics and history. I was just one class shy of a minor in religion as well. But that was a great opportunity for me, fully funded by the Department of Veterans Affairs education benefits. Very, very important for me to have had that opportunity. I've been representing Lewiston in the Maine State Legislature for the last 4 years. That, alongside my service to this country, best things I've done in my life without question. It is such an honor to represent a community, get to know that community better than you ever dreamed that you could, and to really stick up for people and stay focused on getting the job done for them in many different ways. Speaking about my voting record, I want you to know that I've been successful in the last 4 years in the legislature, and I hope you agree with me that experience matters. It matters in government, it matters in politics. 10 bills in all I passed into law in 4 years in a divided government where Republicans controlled the Senate and Democrats the House. That wasn't easy. I think the governor signed one, maybe 2 of them into law. I know of one. It was the one to help first responders diagnosed with post-traumatic stress and identifying that as a workplace injury to make sure they could get workers' compensation. But other than that, I've always had to override the veto. That requires 2/3 vote. That means being able to work across the aisle. That being said, since I know I am in a Democratic primary here, you don't want to just all hear about working together with people, maybe concerned about, is Jared going to work with the Trump administration, whatever it may be. I'm the House Assistant Majority Leader. That's the House Whip. That's a partisan leadership position that I was elected to because I fight for democratic values. And I do it without any hesitation whatsoever. I told this story earlier. It's the first time I've actually shared this one, but it was at a little house party I had just down the road. I woke up one morning in my first term as a legislator, and we all know what the political environment is like these days. I looked at the front page of the Lewiston Sun-Journal, this ran in the Bangor Daily News too, and the headline is, Governor Paul LePage says Lewiston lawmakers should be rounded up and executed in Kennedy Park. That is the community I represent. Yes, he was talking about me. He was upset with me and my advocacy for passenger rail, which he thinks is a bad thing. I think it's a good thing for people, for transportation, for our economy, for our environment. But the reason why I tell you that story is It is a pretty outrageous statement. It is wrong. It is representative of everything that is wrong with our politics these days, that people are speaking like that about each other, talking about executing Democrats or Republicans. It makes me think of when I served in Iraq, to be honest with you, and the first week I was there, town leaders got executed by the insurgency because they were political leaders. I mean, this is actually quite serious. And it would have been easy for me to take the bait and go in there and go right after Paul. I talked about Joe Biden earlier, fighting with Donald Trump and talking about I'm going to bring him out to the shed and show him what's up. Feels good, but is it really productive? Does it make a difference? I want you to know I'm tough enough to take a cheap shot, and I have the integrity to hold my chin up high and stay focused, stay above the partisanship, and get the job done. If you want someone if you want someone that will fight for you and isn't going to back down 1 inch, I am the candidate that you want. But if you also want someone that can work across the aisle, pull people together, and get things done, I am also the candidate that you want to vote for. I think that is really important. I think that's what we need in politics these days. 2 quick things I want to say before I open it up to questions. It is so important that we win this election. Absolutely critical. All the things that we all care about, no matter what it is, the environment, healthcare, a better economy, a fairer economy, better wages, better opportunities, better education, policies, and funding of our public education system. I can go on, and we're going to do that together. I'm sure you're going to tell me what the top priorities are for you. We have to win it. In 2010, Paul LePage won in a big Tea Party wave. We lost control of both the House and the Senate, and there was a lot of pieces of Paul LePage's agenda that I think are very similar to Donald Trump's. Sometimes I think that they're sharing the same roadmap and the same plan. And all that Paul LePage was really able to accomplish in that first term was pushing through some big tax cuts that people really didn't need at that time. They were all of his tax cuts were always favoring the people that needed it least, the most wealthy, with a little bit for working class people, always trying to cut taxes for corporations. But so many of his other priorities he was not able to pass in those first 2 years. And then we got organized and we took back the majority in 2012. We held it in 2014 and 2016. I've been a part of holding the line and protecting people in the state from what it was overall a very harmful agenda that could be far worse in this state than it is right now if we had not won that Democratic majority back in 2012 and held on to it all these years. So thinking about this race for this country, for the state of Maine, and for Maine CD2, we got to do it. We absolutely have to win in 2018. Great damage is being done to our federal departments, like the EPA, like the Department of Health and Human Services, the Department of Education. I don't want to know what this administration is up to and the ways in which they're getting away with it because one party controls the White House, the Senate, and the House. It is so important that we win this election, and this seat is going to be targeted, it's going to be close, and it's going to matter. 24 seats for a Democratic majority, 35 heavily targeted seats in the nation, and this is one. Absolutely have to win. They always say that when someone gets reelected once, that's it. But I look at this election really as his first real re-election. He ran against the same candidate twice, and now he's going to face someone new. I hope it's me. I hope that you're going to vote for me in this primary and that it will be. But we got to win in 2018. It's just like that 2012 election here in the state of Maine. Please remember, as you think about this election, in this primary, as you think about me as an individual, and beyond that, in July, in the fall, if you're wondering if I am your candidate, how involved, how much time and effort you want to put in, remember this about me. I know what this job is about. I know that it's about you and not about me. I know it's about our community and not about me. I know that it's about all of the state of Maine and not just about the Democratic Party. When I was in the Marines, you may have heard me tell you this story before. I think it is really important. When it was time to eat, we had a very simple rule. Lowest ranking person is first in line to eat. The highest ranking person is last. Practically speaking, when you're in a place like the mountains in Afghanistan, what that means is leaders get a little bit less food on their plate. But symbolically, this was the rule from day one. It was meant to teach young folks like myself, men and women, what leadership, real leadership, is all about. It's about serving people. It's about taking care of the people that you lead before you ever think about taking care of yourself. That has been my approach to representing the community that I do in Augusta, Lewiston. That's been my approach to being a Democratic leader these last 2 years, putting people like Brian Hubble, state representative from Bar Harbor, who elected me to be the assistant majority leader, first, before me, helping him make sure he gets his priorities done. This is what it's been all about for me. I love that kind of leadership. It's just a part of who I am, and that's really what I think we all want out of our representation in Washington, in Augusta, in our municipal town halls, people who are always going to do what's best for the community first. And that is exactly what I am and what I promise to be for you. So thank you very much for listening, and we've got plenty of time. I hope you've got lots of questions, so bring them at me. Little questions about Congress, questions about this campaign, questions about the state legislature, questions about my background, where I grew up, favorite hobbies, whatever it is. It's all fair game. I'm happy to have a conversation, so thank you. You're first.
My final deciding factor for any candidate in June or November will be, are you 100% behind universal health care?
Yes. Just, yes.
I have a concern because I saw a chart recently where it showed the top 10 candidates or current Congress people who were supported by the NRA. Andrew Paulson was, I think, a 6th or 7th on the list with the amount of money he has been given. What do we do?
Beat him.
How do we do it with that kind of money that is being pumped in? And regardless of whether you're interested in guns or not, it feels very wrong that that kind of money is coming into our state. I believe he was the smallest state in the union on that list of 10, and the money is pouring in.
Yeah, I don't. For starters, I've been asked if I'm going to take NRA money. I say no. On top of that, just to be honest, that's a pretty easy promise for me to make because they're not going to offer me anything.
I didn't want to hurt your feelings, but I had a hunch that was true.
So we can set that aside. You don't have to worry about that. Yeah, he's taking NRA money. What I'm most concerned about is all the other corporate special interest money that he takes. When you compare the amount of NRA money he's taken to the full sum of corporate special interest group money that is funding his campaign, it's astounding. $2.5 million, and well over half of it has just come from corporate special interest PAC groups and others. Meanwhile, I am raising all of my money from individuals. The only PAC money I will accept comes from labor organizations, and that's it. So I don't know what to tell you. You got to work hard. You got to get out there. It's not all about money. He actually got outspent by the Democrats in 2016, and he won. So it's not just going to be about money. We're gonna outwork them.
Nancy Pelosi is our leader. Would you endorse her to continue to be our leader?
I don't. I don't. To be completely honest with you, I am part of a group of 19 candidates running across this country. All Democrats, all veterans of Afghanistan, Iraq, men and women. We call our group Serve America, and we are running for different reasons. We have different communities with different needs. We have one common message that we share. It's time to put this country first, above the party affiliation. It's time to put people before politics. We feel like we understand that. We see the bigger picture by virtue of the service that we've given this country fighting in Afghanistan and Iraq. I get it. Republicans are not my enemy. I don't agree with them on most things. I intend to try and beat them in campaigns and to push through the policies that I believe in, but they're not the enemy. So I think that's important. And above all else, we're all calling for a new generation of leadership in America. Passing the torch to my generation is a part of pushing for the change that I think we all want and need. And so why I'm not trying to say that I have some problem with Nancy Pelosi or with Steny Hoyer or any number of political leaders. I think that I'm looking for change if they're the appropriate leader steps forward.
I think that's a great message. How are you going to get that message across to the great expanse of Congressional District Number 2, like Aroostook County, Piscataquis County? How are you going to do that?
Well, 2 ways: hard work, elbow grease, and you know, getting out there in the field. That's all I've been doing since August 24th. Other than being in the legislature, I've been campaigning. On Easter, sitting, eating with my wife, I looked back, I realized it was the first day I had taken off since the New Year. I haven't taken a day off since. I'm not going to until June 12th, and I hope I still have life in me on June 13th, and I won't take any time off beyond that. So that's one way. Just get out there. I've already been all over this district, and that's not going to stop. This is my first town hall. I've got 14 more scheduled already between now and June 12th, and we're not going to stop adding them to the schedule as long as we know people want to be there. The second way, to be completely honest, I'm going to have to go up on television. People still watch TV in this district. They still watch 6, 8, 13, 23, Channel 5, and the 6 o'clock news. So I'm going to need the resources to drive up that name recognition, tell my story, and my message. So.
Will you commit to holding town halls, if elected, public and in the district and in person?
100%. I actually enjoyed this. I did 16 town halls. The first time I did them was starting last year as a Democratic leader, Sarah Gideon, the Speaker of the House, Troy Jackson, the Senate Majority Leader, 5 Democratic leaders. We traveled around. We did about 21 town halls from Kittery to Fort Kent. East to west, we did them all over. We went out of our way to go into what are viewed as Republican towns and stand there and not screen any questions. You know, the governor did all his town halls, but you had to like pass your question up to his staff, and they're like, you can throw that one away and keep this one. And, you know, no, I'll take any question from anyone. I'll disagree with people in the light of day, respectfully, and try and find where we do agree on things. But no, I enjoy doing this. I learn as much as I hope you do.
All right, I'm not going to be nice. Everybody here has been nice, but I'm going to say that there's an element to Game of Thrones here, and I'm thinking you're going to get killed here because you're being too nice. Mm-hmm. And I'm concerned that there's and progressives tend to be too nice, and that's why we get beat. And there's some stuff left on the battlefield here that I'm wondering if you guys are picking up. One of which is, and this is the elephant in the room, there's 2 elephants in the room. There's Fulford, who's gone, but there's parts of his team. Mm-hmm. And also there's this crazy ad from Lucas, which is dark money. And you know, I was trying to be nice about Lucas. I've been watching his website. The minute I saw that dark money ad, you know, I've been telling my friends I won't go personal. Well, that dark money ad opened that door to now Lucas's personal, not his personal life, but his adventures, his way of being with his mother's money is now fair game. Maybe I'm too Game of Thrones. I didn't even watch the show, but I'm thinking too much, you know, let's get down and wrestle type of thing.
I love Game of Thrones. Great.
But you see my point. I'm saying that there's, you know, Fulford's there. The leftover of Fulford is important.
Yep.
And Lucas's ad is important. And I'm wondering, are you guys, you're going town hall, and I respect you because you must be tired yourself. God, it's crazy what you're doing. But I'm also worried about your strategy. Mm-hmm. Are you picking this stuff up? Like Phil Bailey, I don't know where he's going to be, but Phil Bailey, man, he'd be a good guy to have on the team if you get him on your team.
No, understood. I will try and respond to that.
It's kind of a mess
question the best I can. Yeah, I am a nice guy, and I believe that I'm trying to tell you all the reasons why you should vote for me. I want you to learn who I am and understand my values. And so I spend most of my time talking about myself, which isn't something that comes natural to me. So all I would tell you is one of the criticisms I sometimes hear from people. I think this is part of this being a Marine, being trained and disciplined, or controlling your emotions. And people say, "Well, geez, Jared, you've got a lot of knowledge from your time and experience in government. I think you clearly know more than the other candidates, but you don't have like the same passion." When I'm backed into a corner and someone comes after me, you will see the passion. I will always stand up for myself, for my community. I can't stand a bully, and those are the things that bring it out for me. When it's time to really stand out for people that need to be stood up for. And I won't let anyone push me around. So don't worry about Game of Thrones and whether or not I'm too nice to win the game. For those of you that don't know, all the nice people in this show or book series, HBO, Game of Thrones, all the nice people died. That's what the reference is all about, in case you were wondering. So I'm not worried about that, because I'm tough enough for this.
Yeah.
So Jonathan Fulford has left this race, and I was worried about Jonathan. I've known Jonathan for years now. He's been fighting hard, running state senate campaigns in Waldo County, came up a little short. I respect that man very much. I was worried about him when I heard that he was leaving the race. I understand that he is okay, that everyone in his family is okay. It was a personal family decision, and it felt like time to step aside, and I respect that, and I respect him and his years of advocacy and hard work trying to get to the state legislature to represent Waldo County. So I'm going to set Jonathan aside. Lucas St. Clair, again, I like him, I respect him. Clearly, there's an emerging issue here that is going to be unavoidable. It's going to have to be spoken about. And you brought it up. I understand it was brought up in Belfast at an event last night. There is a television ad that's up, and it is paid for by the Maine Outdoor Alliance. That is a 501c4 organization. You'll hear people talk about dark money in politics. That is basically exclusively talking about 501c4 nonprofit organizations that are in the business of putting money into politics. And they don't have to abide by the same rules that candidates do. So I have to tell you who my donors are. Every 3 months I file a report with the FEC that tells you who gave me money, where it came from, how I'm spending it. That's about transparency. In an age of Citizens United, it is transparency that can best equip the public to at least try and follow the money and see how it's influencing politics. 501c4s don't have to report their donors. You don't know where the money's coming from. That's the problem with dark money. And this particular organization was opened up in March of this year. It has one officer with very close ties to Lucas. Yes, that's true. A consulting firm with a history of being hired by the Quimby family to work on Katahdin Woods and Waters. Yet what they're saying is there's no connections between us and this organization. There's no coordination whatsoever. I've raised more money than Lucas. Like I said, I don't think it's all about who has the most money, but I've always anticipated that I would be outspent in this race because of the resources that he has available to him, which I do not think is a fault. I'm not going to ever attack him or his family because they have money. That's not necessarily a bad thing. It's what you do with it. I think the only problem with dark money, again, is where is the money coming from, and people have a right to know. So what can I say? It's legal. It should not be legal. We should reform that and make sure that, at the very least, these organizations have to reveal their donors. And I would call on Maine Outdoor Alliance, whoever they are, they just opened up. Why don't you put your cards on the table, tell us who your donors are? And then we don't have a problem because we have transparency, and that's what it's the best tool that we can use until we repeal the Supreme Court's Citizens United decision. So I'm glad you brought it up because I've been worrying about it, and I know that I'm not going to be able to avoid this issue. It's clearly going to come up almost everywhere I go between now and June 12th.
You mentioned repealing Citizens United. How would you go about doing that? Would this be a move to amend, or how?
It would help if we would win elections when it really mattered and put a president in there that would build a Supreme Court bench that would do it.
So you don't think the House and the Senate can do it?
Not right now. Democrats need to win for that to happen. That's a 2/3 vote constitutional amendment. I think that constant public pressure leaning on all sitting elected officials, whether they're a Democrat or a Republican or an independent, can push us in that direction, but at the end of the day, it's going to have to be a very large Democratic majority and a lot of pressure on independents and Republicans to do the right thing and amend the Constitution if we're ever going to be successful doing that. Until then, I'll tell you, it's all about transparency, 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 and putting forward candidates that will say no to corporate dark money, who will condemn and say, I don't want this dark money in my race, please stop. But legally, you can't make them stop.
Current popular interpretation of the Second Amendment is going to be a problem with you in District 2. How are you going to combat that? I mean, we've got so many people. I'm a gun guy, but there are so many people out there that are so focused in on it. Don't take my guns from me. And Auckland seems to be bowing to them. What do you think you can do? I've heard you speak that you can take apart an M16 in so many minutes and put it back together.
Sure.
Or the equivalent or whatever.
Yeah, I used to have a drill instructor leaning over my shoulder, breathing down my neck, telling me to hurry up and put that weapon back together. So I can do that. Did anyone ever see, by the way, the best commercial of the year in 2016, the political ad with Jason Kander running out in, I think it was Missouri, and the NRA was all over this guy. He was a Democrat, the former Secretary of State, an Iraq War veteran, and the NRA was coming after him because he supported background checks, which is just common sense. But this guy stood in a warehouse, blindfolded, with an AR-15 assembled on the table in front of him, and blindfolded, he assembled that AR-15 while talking about all of the various reasons why he thinks background checks are important to keep weapons like this out of the hands of terrorists or criminals. Very impressive ad. It was a different way to look at a Democrat doing that while talking about common sense gun control. So the people who go and say things like out of my cold dead hands and have a very, very, I think, strict interpretation of the Second Amendment, it doesn't matter what I do, they're not going to vote for me. So that's just that. But I have a 7 out of 10 times with the Sportsmen's Alliance Maine, and in my first 3 terms in the legislature, I voted with hunters on some pretty common sense things. I am not an anti-gun person. I'm not going to, come after people's guns. I'm ready to have that conversation, and I think most voters are not single issue voters, and I'm going to appeal to them on the other issues. But while also making clear to them that I respect the Second Amendment, and I understand weapons and the tools that they are. So.
I'm concerned. I worked, a bunch of us here worked on a congressional state campaign, and 2 years ago, and so many of the people we went to talk to, our candidate talked to, said, "You're not going to take our guns away from us, are you?" And I worry that
the answer to that is really simple. No.
No.
Unless you've broken the law.
They don't believe it. They don't believe it.
Are you a felon? Have you committed a felony?
Yeah.
Are you on some kind of no-fly list or something? I mean, why are you asking? No. The answer is no, I'm not going to take away your gun.
And how do you feel about assault rifles then?
Define it. I don't know what it is.
Anything made to be a weapon of war, and not a 12-gauge shotgun,
Yeah.
not a 22 lever action.
Yeah, I guess I will disagree with you on that. They're all weapons of war. They are all tools that are made to kill things. Marines carried M16s. We carried machine guns. We carried shotguns. Go door to door in 9mm pistols. They're all weapons of war. We had an assault weapons ban, and we still had gun violence on mass scales, unlike many other countries in the world, particularly developed industrialized democracies. I don't think that is like the perfect solution that we're searching for, and we all desperately want it because we're sick of the gun violence and the school shootings. But I don't believe that banning an AR-15 specifically is going to solve that problem. It is far more complex than that.
Well answered.
Thank you.
Back to Rob's point, I'm concerned about how we're going to attack basically Colliquid's dark money. We have some on our own side. That really concerns me.
Thank you. Getting back to the earlier question, we have to walk the walk. If someone is putting dark money behind my race, I will say that I do not believe that that should be done. We have to hold ourselves accountable before we can hold Bruce Pollock accountable. So, yes, any dark money supporting any Democratic candidates in Maine, we should not be excited about that. We shouldn't be going, oh yes, more resources. No, this is part of the problem of the lack of transparency and accountability in money and politics that is influencing our politics and our elected officials. Put your cards on the table, show everyone who your donors are, show everyone how you're spending your money. That's the very least we could ask.
Amen.
Where do you stand on global warming and the potential new businesses that might be developed as a result of acknowledging that it exists?
I think it's a very clear, obvious crisis, and yes, also an opportunity for us to do something about it and hopefully create jobs while doing so. Everyone knows about renewable energy and how we can create jobs in that sector as a way of getting off of fossil fuels. So that is a great opportunity. There's many others. Investing in new kinds of technologies, new kinds of vehicles, new kinds of transportation. We can do jobs there. We do steel if we want to do public transportation like we should have in this country. There's a big discussion about doing high-speed rail. Hasn't come yet. That gets a lot of cars off the road potentially. I've been fighting to expand passenger rail in Maine since I got into the legislature. So far, I've only been able to get as far as doing a study about the economic benefit to the state of Maine if we attached Lewiston, Auburn to Portland by passenger rail. So again, focusing on jobs, right? Get the cars off the road, but what kind of jobs are we going to create? What's the economic benefit to the state? For those people that aren't worried about environmental issues, you've got to be able to show them those numbers as well. But no, it is a clear crisis and priority. We have to win in 2018. We have to get back in the Paris Accords. We have to protect the EPA and its funding and its staffing. We have to have regulations for big corporations that are causing global warming, including our heirs. We have to stop Trump from repealing vehicle emissions. I mean, I could just go on and on and on. So I hope that answers your question. Terrible crisis and a clear opportunity if we address it. Yes, and I'm sorry, just keep raising your hands if you're missing. Go ahead, Matt.
So back to the gun question. What would you do to end gun violence?
That's a tall task to end gun violence completely. I can tell you what I've done already as a state legislator. I voted against the bill that said someone could carry a weapon concealed without a permit, without training, without even just walk into Walmart and buy a gun and put it in the back of your pants and walk out. The Marines taught me that training is important, and I think that's particularly true if you're carrying a weapon concealed. It was also about protecting background checks and not eroding them. So I'm going to stand strong by background checks always. We should have that system in place to keep guns out of the hands of people that should not have them. I've supported legislation to say that when someone is charged or found to be at risk of domestic abuse or violence, we can take away their weapons through court order. That made sense to me because the #1 cause of homicide in the state of Maine is domestic violence, and I take that very seriously. More important, I think, than I would that individual's right to have their weapon. We have to protect people's lives at the end of the day. And if there's a clear reason to make sure someone doesn't have a weapon, then we need to act on that. This year, I've supported similar legislation called the red flag provision. Florida legislature passed it. Vermont legislature passed it. This is the one that says if someone is found by authorities to be a risk to themselves because of some kind of mental health crisis or because of some kind of violent threats that they've made on social media, we can get a court order and take their weapons away for up to 180 days. I supported moving forward on a debate to ban high-capacity magazines so that we don't have people running around with a 30-round clip and an AR-15, but instead 10, which is far more reasonable in terms of what you might actually use it for, whether that be hunting or target practice. Those are some of the things that I'm willing to work with you on gun safety and trying to address gun violence. At the end of the day, if I had to choose anything to address this issue, it would be a healthcare system that makes mental health care, behavioral health care, resources available to every American, and a system that's really out there reaching out to people and making sure that they're getting that care when they need it.
What do you plan to
put in your TV ads to, you know, I don't wanna say against Poliquin, but I guess really this is what I mean.
Well, I can tell you, I've learned that television ads are incredibly expensive. I've talked a little bit about trying to reform campaign finances by acknowledging the fact that campaigns have become a kind of industry of their own. It is like a billion-dollar industry, and the consultants and the TV stations are making an awful lot of money on our campaigns and our democracy. It's ridiculous. 1 week of television across this district, just 1 week in this primary period, is going to cost me about $55,000 for 1 week. So I'm not in a financial position to go up against Bruce Poliquin right now. I'm trying to win a primary, and I think I will be fortunate to have about 3 or 4 weeks of television to introduce myself to the voters in this district. But that's astounding, right? $200,000 to talk to people for about 3 weeks.
So you will have ads in May
I will have that.
before the primary?
Yes. I hope you like that.
So I'm assuming that you are pro-abortion, and I'm wondering how you are going to talk to people up in the down east and north and wherever who are more right-to-lifers, and it's my understanding that Chris Poliquin has a lot of ins with the evangelical churches. How will you counteract that?
First thing is I will use Planned Parenthood's own language and direction about this. I am pro-choice. Nobody's pro-abortion. Nobody. But many of us are pro-choice. And making sure that women have a right to make healthy decisions, make decisions about what they're going to do with their bodies and whether or not they're ready to have a child economically, personally, in terms of their own health. These are personal, really important decisions. There's always a certain hypocrisy there for me, for the party that always talks about government, stay out of my bedroom, stay out of my wallet, stay out of my life, less government is better. But then all of a sudden with this issue, it's like, we want government right up in like your most personal space. I don't get it. So I'm 100% pro-choice. My voting record tells you that. I'm never going to back down on that issue. The Supreme Court tells most representatives what they can and can't do when it comes to this issue. So if some Republican congressman wants to make some kind of promise like Bruce Poliquin is going to do something about it, I tell him to go talk to the Supreme Court. He's not going to make these changes. We're watching these lawsuits all across this country, and they're standing firm by the woman's right to choose. So that's one thing I remind people. You don't have to worry about where I'm standing on this issue if you don't agree with me, because what you have to worry about, I guess, is what the law says and what the Supreme Court has to say about it, what the court system has to say. Separate but equal branch of government has made a ruling on this. At the end of the day, though, I mean, a lot of people, I think, across the state who are not pro-choice believe in family planning services and the importance of making those types of investments to make sure that we can help prevent unwanted pregnancies. I'm willing to talk about that. I was up in Holton having a spaghetti dinner, speaking to about 40 people. There was only one person in the room that felt really strongly about this and wanted me to acknowledge that it was murder. That's not someone that's going to vote for me. You know, I was respectful and respectfully disagreed, but you know, from a religious standpoint, I just said, I go to church too, sir, and the lessons I've learned from Jesus tell me not to judge, and so, that's not for me, or you, but I don't know if that gives you a sense of how I talk about these issues.
You were talking about your education earlier. This is not meant to be a softball question. I want to know what you're reading, and I want to know what you learned in college that really has stuck with you.
Yeah. I had a pretty unique college experience. I mean, it's not that rare, but I was the oldest student at Bates College. I was the only local at Bates College. I was a county and a student. I was the only veteran at Bates College. So I learned a lot there without question. I think I also taught people a lot there because I had 4 years of combat life experience in the Marine Corps that I brought into the classroom. I went out of my way in politics to take every class they offered on Afghanistan and Iraq and Iran and the entire Middle East. I thought it was a good opportunity to learn something more about the life experience I had just had in combat. I took every class that they offered on Islam. I wanted to learn about these places that I was just involved in a war in. And I think I learned an awful lot through that experience. Who?
What do you read, or what books did you read that really stuck with you?
Oh, geez, that is putting me right on the spot. I got to dig back. Yes, Final Swoop. I'm not going to pull some kind of like political theorist like that out of my head. But you know, I read a lot of political theory. We read all kinds of different stuff. I'll tell you a quick story I told Jim in the car. Jim Tierney, who's here with me, drove me here today, former AG, former many things. But I told him a story about Bates College. And there's this political theory called deconstruction. Has anyone ever heard about it? Okay, so Mike has. And I wrote a paper. Sometimes they talk about taking language and making it your own. You take the language being used against you and you pull it in and make it yours. When it came to LGBTQ issues, this is something that they talk about a lot. I was diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder when I came home from Iraq. I've never felt like the way that it's stigmatized and talked about by the general public was matched what was going on with me, how I felt, what I'm capable of, and who I am. I think you can see that I may not fit the box that you may see in Hollywood movies about veterans coming home all broke and stuff. I had post-traumatic stress. Drop the D. It's not a disability in my opinion. I redefined it and wrote an entire paper about why those experiences gave me such great strength to overcome anything standing in my way. I call it post-traumatic strength. That is a form of political theory called deconstruction, and I deconstructed their model and turned it in mine. I don't know if that's helpful or not, but.
I have a couple of questions about the military. I served in the United States Marine Corps myself way back, and so simplify and thank you for your service. A couple things I'm really concerned about are women in the service and what their experience is, and how we like to think that they're integrated, but they really have not been integrated and treated in the same way. Kirsten Gillibrand has been fighting a battle that, and she hasn't gotten too far, but to change the military. It's called the MJI, a Military Justice Improvement Act, so that women serving honorably, in not only the Marines but all the armed forces, have recourse to sexual violence.
Yes.
Right now, they really don't.
To the civilian forces.
Correct. Yes. Right now, the laws, as you know, based on the 1700s law, where it stops with the company commander. I myself, as a Marine, experienced this, and of course, you would imagine way back then it was way worse. But to my shock, I'm in a lot of blogs for female veterans and women in the Marines, young women in the Marines, experiencing the same thing. Even though they've been fully integrated, perhaps are being integrated into all the MOSs, including all the combat MOSs. And especially the Marine Corps still segregates female Marines from male Marines in their training. And so I'm just wondering what you think about this. That's number one. What do you think about changing these 1700 codes of military justice for women to integrate women more equally? Because my view is that the more women are fully integrated and equalized, the more humane the military will become. And I get the impression from you as a Marine, that's what you base your character is one of honor and perseverance and everything you learn in the Marine Corps. Okay, that's number one. Number two is the VA is in complete disarray right now. I'm in the VA system. I have post-traumatic stress, and I agree with you. I don't think it's a disability. I think it should, I wish we could get rid of the disabled thing. That's really quite disabling to us. But right now, there's all this talk about privatization of the VA, which to my mind is a huge mistake, but I don't know what you think about that.
Sure.
So that's those two things.
Yep. Three, and I'm going to try and remember them all. For starters, let's see, VA privatization, that's the easiest one. No.
Good.
Never. Not going to do that. My understanding is that Bruce Poliquin on that committee actually voted in committee to privatize VA healthcare services in some instances, and then turned around and changed his vote later when he realized the American Legion was watching and was very angry. So, no, I'm not going to do that. I've used the VA healthcare system. I know it's not perfect, but when it's properly staffed and resourced, I've gotten good care there, and I feel comfortable going to the Department of Veterans Affairs. But I want to see the finger pointing stop. It's so amazing to me that Congress is constantly casting blame at the VA about what is not working, and the VA is like pointing back at Congress. And this is an institution that is serving people who were taught by the military that blaming people for what's gone wrong is unacceptable. That the buck stops here, and you take responsibility for your unit's failures, and you share credit for its success. And so what I want Congress and the VA to stop doing is to stop fighting over what's broken or they're not giving us enough money, and just focus on getting the job done. I don't care whose fault it is at this point, just fix it. That's how I feel about the VA, but I'm not going to privatize it ever. I think next I'll talk about integration of women into the military. The Marine Corps infantry that I grew up in, there were no women. When I went to Afghanistan, I hardly ever saw a woman in uniform. I was out in the mountains near the Pakistani border in combat, same in Iraq. So I can tell you, it's hard for me to imagine what that would look like in terms of having women join into like those infantry units. But it's something that I fully support, and I know is possible. Other countries do it. No one questions the strength and professionalism of the Israeli military force. They are integrated. The only thing I would say is, because I have so much faith in women like yourself and the fact that you can do the job, is meet the same standards and join the same units and perform the same jobs in combat as anyone. And we've already seen some women that are fully capable of doing that, and they're going to rise up through the ranks and be combat leaders, is what I believe. And we're going to see more and more of that, I think, as time goes on. Someone asked me at like a forum whether or not I was a feminist. They asked all the candidates, and my response was, I'm not going to answer that question. I guess I'll leave it to some of you to tell me. But what I will tell you is that I'm the assistant majority leader, and I follow the strong leadership of the Speaker of the House, Sarah Gideon, and the majority leader, Aaron Herbig from Belfast. And I have no problem whatsoever following strong women as leaders. I don't even look at them as strong women leaders. I just look at them as the strong leaders that they are in this state, and they do amazing work. If you don't believe me, go look and see the work that Sarah Gideon has done in the Maine State Legislature the last 2 weeks. It's really amazing to watch. So yes, I believe that women should be fully integrated in the military units, particularly in the Marine Corps. It's a tough nut to crack. It's a tough little insular world, and I know that they should be there, and they can't do it.
NJI?
Yes. When I worked for Susan Collins for 2 years on Homeland Security issues, I also advised her on veterans issues. Military sexual assault is a big problem, and what makes it most problematic is that it's handled all within the judicial court system, and a lot of things get swept under the rug, and that is problematic. The military has constantly promised that they're going to reform itself again and again and again, and still the scandals kept breaking. The Uniform Code of Military Justice is way behind the times and needs to be changed. So I'm going to try and be careful about how I talk about this, because there are children in the room. But when I was working for Susan Collins, and we were working on some of Kirsten Gillibrand's bills, and I was advising Susan Collins whether or not to co-sponsor these things, there was one particular instance that blew my mind. So we all know the statutory definition of sodomy. There was one Air Force pilot who had come home and was found to be hanging out with his dog too much. And the military did not want to move forward on doing something about this because they were worried about how much money had been put into training this pilot, and that he was like a really valuable training tool to the U.S. government, and therefore they did not want to move forward with any kind of prosecution or acknowledge that maybe there was a sign that there might be some kind of mental health problems going on here. And that was a little scary to me, but particularly because it was still a military that was saying no, you're getting rid of don't ask, don't tell, and had a problem with people serving in the military because of that definition of sodomy. Oh, it's not, in the Uniform Code of Military Justice, it's not allowed, but yet we're not going to go after, any discussion about whether or not this guy should be flying $1 million pieces of equipment. I'm with you, we need to work on that. So. But recourse to citizen, the judicial system is certainly one way to fix it if the military won't fix it themselves.
And they don't want to. I mean, Congress has to do something, and you have to do something. Because it's from the 1700s that the buck stops with company commander.
I agree.
The commanding officer.
In case you're wondering what it is, a lot of times whether or not to prosecute the military is at the discretion of the commander. If the commander doesn't want scandals in their unit, or is friends or admires the person they're serving with, at the end of the day, we have to hold their own accountable. There are many great, honorable people that serve in the military, commanders that do the right thing and do hold everyone accountable no matter what, and they believe themselves that they should be held accountable, but unfortunately sometimes it is a system that can be used. So I agree with you, and I would support that.
Well, I'm the person back in the fall during CD2 who asked you if you're I think I asked you to support the Equal Rights Amendment, and you said absolutely.
Already voted for it.
Yes,
yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, and actually what I'm asking you right now is currently in the House, actually in the House and the Senate, there is a joint resolution. Basically what it would do is it would eliminate the timeline, the 1982 timeline on the Equal Rights Amendment. We have 2 states left to ratify. And at the point they ratify, what this resolution is asking in the House is that at that point, the Equal Rights Amendment will become part of the Constitution. And we want to know that, and this has been introduced by Jackie Spear, and we'd like to know, as our group, Equal Rights Maine is asking you, would you co-sponsor if you are elected?
Yes, I'm familiar with Jackie Spear and the work that she does. So I've supported her at the state level, and it'd be silly not to support it in Congress. So yes.
I've always been opposed to nuclear power, and yet I took an 8-hour climate science program by a retired theoretical physicist who does not talk about climate change. He does not want to get political at all. He just gave you the science. That's all he talked about. And you can make your own conclusions. And one thing he did say was that we should look at nuclear power as an interim energy source because, there's no carbon footprint. Yes, there are issues, obviously. He said the new designs are incredibly safe, and we should not throw that out. And I think it's very hard politically to even talk about it because people are going to just, they'll kill you for it, not kill you, but they'll be opposed to you because of that. So just sort of, how do you proceed with something like that that may make sense as an interim solution to climate warming?
Pragmatically. So I took a physics class at Bates College, where the professor, this guy emails me every week now that I'm in the legislature, making sure I support solar and wind, and are you going to support this bill on tidal? And the guy loves renewable energy. But when I was a student, what he said was, it's not ready to replace fossil fuels, and it's a long way from being fully ready to replace fossil fuels. There's a lot of research and development, commercialization, getting the cost down before it's going to be competitive and ready to go to a large enough scale where we can really get off fossil fuels on solar, on wind, on other forms. Some of the I was talking about this at a candidate forum at Bates College, actually. Some of the candidates disagreed with me, but look, the scientists, I always put my trust in. The science it's the science, and they're the professionals, and when a scientist tells me that something's not quite ready to be the prime source of energy that can replace fossil fuels, I'm going to trust them, because frankly, I am not a scientist. That's why I believe in climate change. The scientists are telling me that it is real, and it's a real threat, and I've looked at the numbers, so. When it came, we had this question before at the forum, right? And then I looked back to my professor in the class where he actually said, I want to support all these things. Even talking about electric vehicles, he said, look at the footprint of these things. You got to plug them into something. It's fueled by electricity. What do you think it is feeding that? People talk about how great the internet is, and we're not using paper, and we're not cutting down trees. What's fueling the electricity that you are using every time that you are surfing the web? We often don't think about these types of things and realities. And at the end of the day, what he told us was the one other form of energy that is out there right now that could replace fossil fuels on a large scale is nuclear. He doesn't like it either. It has some negative aspects, clearly. You got to go dig into the ground for it. It has a byproduct. You have to store it somewhere. It is not great. It's not the perfect solution. Sometimes people talk about not letting the perfect be the enemy of the good. If we want to move faster on getting off oil and natural gas, that is a possibility. I grew up learning about Wiscasset in high school and stuff. It makes me uncomfortable, but I'm willing to have that conversation if it means doing something about an out of control, warming world and climate change and rising sea levels. If that's the only solution, we should really be talking about it. But at the end of the day, I've thrown all my effort into supporting renewable energy. Good. That was a long answer. I'm sorry.
I'll keep bugging you here. A couple of things. Two questions. I'm confused a little bit about how you leverage your veteran status. Maybe not for the primary, because you're looking at Dem voters there. But can you, Bruce doesn't have that. For me, one of the catches that you caught me was, my son worked in the North Tower and was late to work. My daughter was in a dorm watching the tower coming down, wondering if her brother was in it. We all have that 9/11 moment. We all have that November 1963 moment, in this room anyway. But we all have these moments in time, which to me are hooks. And that brings me to my second question, is that will you, before you put stuff out on TV, are you going to have it vetted by people to look at? Because my sense is, because we all have these moments, that's an important moment to use, because Maine had a lot of people at ground zero. A lot of people. At Blue Hill Elementary School, the phys ed teacher's brother was in the South Tower and made it out from the top. He ran down through the fire and everything. And so, to me, that's a wicked important thing. The service that comes from an event like that you did, I thank you for. And I'm hoping that you will tell people about that. And I'm hoping that we get a chance to see it, maybe somehow before it goes out there.
Have you ever seen my launch video? No one?
Yeah.
Yeah. Go to JaredGoldenForCongress.com.
I've seen that.
Right.
No, but I'm talking about the ads that will be on TV.
Yeah, I will probably touch upon that, because let's be honest, my service in the Marines in Afghanistan and Iraq was a foundational experience.
Right.
And everything that I learned, you've heard me tell the stories, what I understand about leadership, about putting people that I lead first, not about myself, about taking responsibility for unit failures, sharing credit, not worrying about who gets the credit. These are all military values: honor, integrity, service. It's a big part of who I am. To be honest with you, there are some people out there, go look on Facebook, who criticize me like crazy and say, oh, he never shuts up about the military. And all he talks about is that he was in the military. They think, that I'm trying to brag on it. So I am also conscious of that.
Yeah.
That's not what I'm doing. I'm proud of what I did.
Can you go to a VFW hall after June?
Of course. So you go to VFW Hall tomorrow night and have a beer with
Right.
the vets.
So that is something you can do. I didn't know if there was like a rule about politicking at the
Already doing it. But I'm not going to ask people to vote for me because I'm a veteran. I'm not
Right.
going to ask veterans to vote for me because I'm a veteran. I'm going to ask them to vote for me because I'm the right person to do the job.
Right.
And talking about what I learned in the military is certainly a big part of that story. So you will hear me talk about it.
Okay.
You will probably hear some people try and split vote me and talk about it negatively.
Yeah.
I'm ready for that too.
Good.
Very proud of the service, proud of the people I served with. But I'm more than that as well.
Yeah. Great.
Have you asked the question yet? No, come to you now.
Okay, I'm assuming that you have a group of folks who you go to for bouncing ideas off of and sort of an advisory group. I'm wondering what percentage of them are women?
I don't have a percentage off the top of my head for you. I turn a lot to people I serve with in the legislature, or have served with in the legislature, and others that I've worked with in my time in politics. So 4 years as an elected official, 3 before that as a political staffer. I've met a lot of good women who are experts in this type of stuff. Speaker Sarah Gideon is someone I am constantly speaking to about this. You may have seen she wrote an op-ed, put it out, and has endorsed my candidacy. I am always turning to her for advice to bounce some things off of and see what do you think about that. She helps me in other ways. She'll make political calls to help me out. Who else can I tell you about? My wife. She worked in the state senate as a legislative aide after she graduated from Bates College. She was field director for Emily Kane in the 2014 primary. She's a Lewiston city councilor. She's in law school right now down at the University of Southern Maine. She probably wishes I would stop asking her for so much advice about this campaign and talking about the issues and the ways in which I talk about them. I could go on and on, but I guess I would say if you look at the list of people that have endorsed me, you're going to see a good, strong breakdown of women and men who are supporting me, and I rely on all of them for advice. Jill Barkley from Emerge, I don't know if you know her, she used to run Emerge here in Maine. She's moved on. She's someone I call all the time, comes to mind. Just some of my most frequent calls, but.
Do you think any of your primary opponents would try to make something out of your having worked for Susan Collins?
Sure, let them.
Yeah. I was just curious. Because I know it was for the Homeland Security Committee, so it wasn't like working in her political office.
Homeland Security issues, if you're wondering what I worked on, you've heard of FEMA, response to natural disasters like Katrina, or man-made disasters like terrorist attacks. Grants that every fire department in Maine receives for fire equipment or staffing, fire safer grants. I was the lead staffer that helped renegotiate the authorization of that grant program, some of which were put in place after 9/11 because those that responded didn't have all of the equipment that they should have had with them. Those are the types of things. These are bipartisan issues. It's easy to work for a Republican when you're talking about helping firefighters and police officers get the equipment they need, or veterans issues. They asked me during the interview, you ever heard of VAN, the voter registration database? Susan Collins knew I was a Democrat since I was 18 years old when I registered as one. She still hired me. So there's a lot of things I don't agree with her about, and I got a lot of respect for her at the same time. So I'm not worried about that. I hope that they go down that road. Dan here works for me. He ran as a Green member of the Green Party in Portland for the state legislature shortly after he got out of college. Susan Collins hired him. He worked for her down in Washington, D.C. And then he went to work for the Democrats out in Nebraska state legislature. And I called him up a week before I launched this campaign. I said, Dan, I need your help. He drove out here to Maine. He works for me now. So Green Party works for a Republican now. Worked for the Democrats, now working for me. Yeah, no, not worried about that at all. Go ahead.
So my daughter's 19, she's pretty excited about voting this year, and she was able to vote the primary last year. What are you going to do to appeal to young voters like that?
Time for a new generation of leaders, and I'm one of them. that ought to be appealing to them for starters. I think they would probably agree about that. Time to pass the torch and have some new leaders. I think talking about things that are going to be impacting their lives, like climate change. I think that is a generation that has grown up knowing how important this is and seeing that we're not making enough progress on it. And they're going to be the ones that really start to feel the impact. So that's one. I think there are a generation that are tired of disgusting partisanship and really just want to see government getting things done and people working together. That's the sense I've gotten from people that are like,
they remember what that's like.
yeah, they've never known anything else. I think they would like it. And I think that I can do that too. You've heard me talk about that. So there's a couple of examples for you. Student debt and dealing with that problem is something that I know is really important as well. But I don't divide along lines with the issues. I mean, what impacts one generation impacts another in most cases, not all. But those are some of the things that I talk about that I think is exciting for them. I saw a hand over here and then you, sir.
Maybe I'm jumping ahead a little bit. But besides the primary, once you beat Bruce, are you ready and organized to do the move that you have to Washington, to be there to do the job, as well as be back here or have contact back here?
Yes. I've worked down there for 2 years. I worked in Augusta. I've served for 4 years in the legislature. I know what I'm going down to get involved in down there, so I will be ready to hit the ground running. I spoke earlier about the similarities between LePage and Trump in their administration. I think I am also very aware of what I am going there to stand up to. So yeah, I am ready. I've been traveling basically since I joined the Marines. So I'm ready to go down to Washington with a sea bag of clothes and you know, find myself a basement in some row house in DC for rent, and no, I'm not going to sleep in my office because I know someone was going to ask me that at some point. So yeah, I'm ready to do that, but I'm going to spend a lot of time back here too. I've got a ton of labor support and labor endorsements. Go look again, JerryGoldCongress.com. And watch that launch video if you haven't seen it, but my issues are all laid out in detail on there. You can read about them, but so are my endorsements. And the reason why I bring that up is I was sitting down with the AFL-CIO executive board recently, and they said, Jared, if you win, will you commit to coming home? And if we organize events where you can talk about the importance of labor, of unions, of worker issues, will you commit to doing that consistently? Into having town halls, even if they're not exclusive to talking about labor issues, and I'm 100% in with that. They're going to ask me to start campaigning on day one, which for them will be sitting in a room trying to raise money. I would want to put just as much emphasis on saying, let's start doing town halls immediately back home in the district, so no problem. You and then you and Noah.
This question is sort of like a book question. I'm trying to get a little bit more behind you, into you. I grew up and saw 1968 come, and I was drafted. I became a CO because I'm still alive behind Vietnam and the Gulf of Tonkin and the whole thing. You saw 2001, 9/11. What did you think about weapons of mass destruction, the story that you were told as a Marine? Because you were serving probably when all this came out.
I was in boot camp when we declared war in Iraq. So I can tell you, as a young 19-year-old at the University of Maine Farmington reading headlines about weapons of mass destruction, I took it for granted that that was honest and real and a serious threat. You'll remember there was discussions about links between Al-Qaeda and Saddam Hussein.
It was very, very well sold. We all believed it, or a lot of us believed it.
But it was always about 9/11 for me, and in Afghanistan. That always made a lot more sense in terms of response for me. I don't know what else to tell you other than that. I was kind of infamous in my unit for having members of my unit watch Fahrenheit 9/11. You remember Michael Moore going around in Congress asking them if they were going to send their sons and daughters to Iraq. I came around once we were very aware that there were no WMD there. to being very skeptical about what the mission was all about. At the end of the day, I had a very memorable experience standing in a room with a bunch of town, village elders in Iraq. This is in 2005, the height of the civil war, really, between the Sunni and the Shia, and we had just cleared through several cities. And I'm with my lieutenant, meeting with these town elders, and these are Sunnis, these are members of the same tribe as Saddam. But you know what they said was, we're glad that Saddam Hussein is gone. We wish you would have done this back in the first Gulf War, and now that you've done it, thank you. Now please leave our country and let us fix this. I'm not necessarily advocating for that was the best thing to do right there in 2005 once we had already invaded. Colin Powell said, you break it, you got to fix it, basically. But no, I'm disturbed, as we all are, that a lot of the justification put forward wasn't truthful. I think we could have just been honest about it. Do you think the American people would have supported the Bush administration in going into Iraq if they'd just been honest about why they viewed it as a security concern? I'm not sure they wouldn't have, to be completely honest with you. Tell the truth. It's that simple. Orange. Okay, orange. You had a question, and then who else? Yeah, I'll let you go first.
Real quickly, Gerard, I think one of the things that's really problematic with our representative government today is the fact, I mean, we want you to maintain contact with us. We want you to come home. But, congressmen and senators have been notorious for, in the past, probably 10 or 15 years. They fly in on Sunday night. They fly home on Thursday. There's not been any kind of interaction, one-on-one, on a weekend, over a barbecue, having a beer together. And I think that's part of the problem with not being partisan and looking at the problems that we have.
It's part of the problem with Augusta. It's astounding to me how little we actually, we spent hours on the House floor on separate sides of the aisle, and we hardly interact. There are many of them that I did not get to know. The only place where that happens is in the committee room, where we're usually broken up, like Democrat, Republican, and you start forming those relationships, and then that's where you make your best friendships, and really, that's where you can leverage those relationships out on the House floor to try and at least start a conversation with people. I think it is important to come home. I mean, I can invite some of my colleagues to come to Maine, and vice versa, go visit their districts and communities. You've got to come home. But I understand what you're trying to say. Last year, when I was new to being the assistant majority leader, the House whip, the Senate whip, Senator Cushing, he stepped down. He no longer is the whip. It's now Amy Volk from Scarborough. But Andre came to me and said, Jared, there's going to be times when the Speaker and the President can't talk, or can't work things out, and things break down, when the two majority leaders aren't getting along, where it's going to come down to you and me. And it's going to be really valuable if we have a good relationship. He said, I'd like to get dinner with you at least once a month, or lunch, or whatever it may be. We went out of our way. It wasn't always easy. We did that. A lot of people say, why are you eating dinner with Andre Cushing? So he's a nice guy. I respect him, and we talked about a lot of things. And at the end of the day, he helped me pass that law that is helping first responders get access to workers' comp when they have post-traumatic stress. He fought for me and advocated for that in the Senate and got it done. And I was awfully thankful I had that relationship. In the midst of the government shutdown, when talks had completely broken down, it was Andre who had the door open for me to come in and talk to him and get some valuable, I think, discussions out of that helped start some things back up and ultimately allowed the Speaker and the President to move forward. So you're absolutely right. That's important.
Well, if you're successful, if you have dinner with McConnell or something like that, we won't hold it against you, okay?
Hey, I can't remember, who it was, but I mean, President Obama went out of his way to try and play golf or have a beer with Boehner or whatever it was. No, you've got to do those things. I mean, if the President invites me to the White House to have a beer up, yes, I'll sit down and talk to him. And maybe we can work together on like infrastructure or something.
Good luck.
Sure, absolutely. He's the President of the United States right now.
When you're driving up, I want you to paint the scene for me. You said you were standing on some mountaintop in Afghanistan. I can't imagine this. Looking at you back, and you voted for Howard Dean. I want you to describe how your fellow Marines reacted to your support. I would be.
Yeah, that's, you just added me on that one. Yeah, I voted for Howard Dean from Afghanistan by absentee ballot, and then I voted for John Kerry. There were a lot of guys from the Boston area all voted for John Kerry, but I might have been alone in being excited about Howard Dean. I don't know, I like his enthusiasm and his passion. I was one of those people, maybe like your daughter, I wasn't super political, but that guy, you know, he was excited, he was passionate, and it grabbed onto me. What little I got to see from the tiny little like TV box that we had in Afghanistan, or the headline clippings that my parents sent me. But no, I did vote for him from Afghanistan.
Yeah.
Yes. Who else? I'm sorry.
I hate to ask the question, but in listening to you talk and the things you've said, and I get the sense that you are very sensitive and very kind, and you've done your homework. Are you tough enough for this? And that's not, I know you're a Marine, but I'm thinking this is a whole different world as far as I'm concerned.
Mm-hmm.
And I would hate to see you eaten up and spit out.
Yeah, that's not good.
Okay, good.
I don't want to be rude, but I think I'm tougher than anyone in this room. In Washington, that's a joke. I mean, I got this. Ask Brian.
Yeah.
I think Brian will tell you I'm the nicest guy, I'm a loyal guy, I've got your back, but don't cross me.
Okay.
And that's what I would say to Chris Paulson.
Let's hear from Ryan. Say it, Ryan. What is this guy like?
Absolutely. I would say this way, I trust the man with my life. And I've seen him absolutely tenaciously committed. The primary quality that makes me confident that Jared will be our next congressman is his absolute fearlessness. And I just want to assure you that he's the right guy.
Thank you. Have you taken any cues from General Mad Dog Mattis on the broad issues and, you know? I mean, he's a man who's both a warrior and a highly educated, sensitive person, but he's infamous for slogans like, you know, I come with peace, but I'm ready to kill everybody. You know, he's infamous for having both
That's right.
the toughness and the sensitivity.
Enter any negotiation, ready to compromise, and find each other in another room.
Perseverance.
You know, I'm glad that he's there trying to hold things together and bring some sanity to our government right now. That's all I think I'll say about Jim Mattis at this time. But yeah, I've learned a lot. I've learned a lot from Colin Powell, who is a Republican but was a general and a great leader. One of the most important things I ever read that he said was never attach your ego to your position in life. You know, he's gone through a lot of different important positions in his life, but he is Colin Powell no matter where he goes. And that's the same for me where he moves.
Before you started at the other place, Jim was telling me a story about your life as a point guard. And so as everybody's saying, are you tough enough, are you a scrappy guy, are you a fighter, I thought I would just give you a softball and let you tell us about your experience as a point guard.
No, I am definitely, I played a lot of sports growing up. I played soccer for a few years. I was a center, which is a lot like the point guard. I played basketball as a point guard. Those are, you know, positions for people I think that are team players that like to direct traffic a little bit. I also played football. I left soccer for football, so yes, I'm tough enough because I also played rugby in college. I don't need pads or helmet, you know, yeah, I would describe myself as a scrapper. Believe me, I just am. That's all there is to it. I actually enjoy it. People don't know that about me. I just don't think that's how to actually get things done and tough. People usually the people that act tough are the ones that are not as tough.
Right.
And so, you know, I'll wear pink. I'm not scared of that. No problems. When the shooting starts, I'm the guy you want. Right.
There's a lot of people who are really turned off by politics, don't vote, things like that. They're very skeptical about, you know, whether they bother to vote, it makes any difference. And they're the kind of people I hear saying, well, I voted for Trump, flip a page, just to shake things up. Yet, you know, we see what's going on in Washington now, and our democracy is threatened. The rule of law is being ignored, and the norms are being ignored. We're in a real bad place. I don't know how you could use that in a campaign. How you can, because it may need to be just something when you prove that if you get the right people in, you'll get better.
Yeah.
But somehow those people, it would be great if you could get them.
We got to get more people involved. We got to get more people to vote. There are different ways to do that. Bernie Sanders is one example of that. He cited a lot of people. He talked about new ideas and really with passion, and got some new voters to come out. So did Donald Trump. He spoke with a lot of passion from a completely different perspective. Paul LePage, he's from my town. He's from Lewiston. I hear people say all the time, I don't really love the way he says those negative things, but I like that he's a fighter. I like that he's fighting for me. So I understand what you're saying, and I think that I can do that, but there are different ways too. I think one of the best ways to get someone that's not involved and doesn't vote to come out and vote for you is to show up and meet them face to face and have a conversation with them. I've always won by going door to door in Lewiston, thousands and thousands and thousands of doors. I got elected by 71% of the vote. In a town that Emily Kane took about 55, in a town that Paul LePage, was very competitive in. It's split ticket kind of a community, like many communities in Maine too. You got to show up. And the reason why I'm telling you this is something I am going to make a promise to you that I will do different than past Democratic campaigns. I'd like you to go home and pull up, like on Ballotpedia or something, 2 votes. Either Emily Kane's 2014 or her 2016 numbers. And then I want you to take the Medicaid expansion vote of November of 2017 and lay them over each other. And what you're going to see is that Medicaid expansion outperformed the Democratic candidate, even in the towns where it failed, by 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 percentage points. There's a really important lesson for the Democratic Party to be learned there about Maine too. Yes, I'm going to win in Lewiston. I'm going to win big in Lewiston. Yeah, we're going to win Bangor. We can run the score up there all we want. If we don't get out into rural towns and meet people where they are, if we don't say, yes, we're going to that town even though it has never voted Democratic, and get in there and meet people, have town halls, go door to door, have coffees, and fight for every single vote. We can't lose these down 70-30 and think that we're going to win. That's how I think we draw a lot of people out. Show up in their town and go meet them and give them a reason to vote for you. That's my style, and that's how I'll do it. I'm going to work hard out in the field.
It's 8:30. Are you ready to quit, or can you take another question?
I can go as long as you want.
You come from an area that has had quite a lot of immigration.
Yes.
What's your stand on our immigration policy, federal immigration policy?
Go look at a op-ed I put in the Bangor Daily News in 2015 talking about the community in Lewiston. And I think you'll like what you see. In terms of federal policy, everyone knows that comprehensive immigration reform needs to happen. There's a reason why, at least in the Senate, that has been many bipartisan efforts to do so. It keeps failing. But yes, we need to fix that. There are even issues I can agree with Republicans about, I think, potentially. One of the things that drives me nuts in Lewiston is asylees, who I have consistently fought to make sure get the resources that they need so that they're not homeless, they're not hungry, that their children are taken care of. Because when they come here and request asylum, the federal government says, yes, right, you can legally be present in this country while we adjudicate your claim And then we're either going to tell you you can stay or you got to go. But for that whole time that they're there, which usually takes well over a year, which is optimistic for them to actually process those claims, they're not allowed to work. They're not eligible for federal assistance. And so it falls on the state, but the state has no choice about whether or not they come here or not. Those borders are not ours to control. It's the federal government's. It's a terrible federal policy. I say let them work. If you're going to tell them that they can be here, put them to work. Or at the very least, if we can't do that, then they should be eligible for federal assistance. So that is one example. I mean, we're going to have to compromise with Republicans a little bit on this. For things like DACA to be permanently dealt with, yeah, we're going to have to give them some border security. I'm okay with that. I'm going to fight for people. And yeah, we should always protect our borders. So I don't know if that's helpful to you. We need to do it. Anyone else? We're done?